Good evening, Dharma friends. Welcome to another session of reading the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. Begin as usual with the prayers before the teachings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge till enlightenment by virtue of giving and the like. I shall reach Buddha or to aid beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge till enlightenment by virtue of giving and the like. I shall reach Buddha who to aid beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge till enlightenment by virtue of giving and the like. I shall reach Buddha who to aid beings. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far, according to the intelligence and predisposition of each being. We assert you turn the Dharma of great law and common wisdom. So in myself reading through these stories, these fables, and all of us listening to them, perhaps we can keep in mind the teaching of the vessel, the worthy vessel for listening to the Dharma, which is, imagine your listening is like a cup. The cup has to not be upside down. Nothing will go into it. The cup can be the right way up, but having a crack in it, meaning that one isn't focused wholeheartedly, and the cup may be dirty and therefore not be able to properly retain the teachings, which I think is to do with improper motivation. So we'll read through 4 chapters this evening. So we've got 3 more lessons after this, and I'm rationing it so that it looks like we'll finish just nicely in time for the end of the term. So we'll begin with chapter 38. If you're reading along, which is page 196 onwards. The beggar woman named Relying on Joy. It's good. Sometimes they literally translate the names from the Sanskrit. Thus I have heard at one time. The enlightened one was residing in the city of Shravasti at the Jetavana monastery in Anathapindika's park. At that time there was in that country a beggar woman named Relying on Joy, who begged for her food. When this woman saw the king, the princes, and many other people making offerings to the Buddha and the Sangha, she experienced great remorse and despair and thought, what former evil have I committed that I have been born in this low caste, poverty-stricken, and now if I were to meet the Buddha, have no seed to sow in the field of virtue? Upon a certain occasion, when she had begged all day and received nothing, she took her only coin and went to an oil merchant. The oil merchant told her, woman, you cannot buy oil with a single coin. What are you going to do with the oil? The beggar woman said, householder, I have nothing and am obliged to beg. It was my intention to buy oil with this coin and offer it to the Buddha. The oil merchant pitied the woman and gave her a great deal of oil. The woman then took the oil to the monastery and lighting a lamp, placed it before the Buddha with the following vow. I have nothing to offer but this tiny lamp, but by virtue of this one offering may I in future times be endowed with the lamp of wisdom. May I purify the defilements and darkness of all beings and enlighten them. That night the oil in all the other lamps became exhausted and burned out, but the lamp lighted by the beggar woman, relying on joy, remained burning until dawn. That day it was Modgalyayana's turn to go on alms round, and when dawn broke, he went up to take up the lamps. Seeing that a single lamp was still burning, was filled with oil, and still had a new wick, he thought, there is no reason for this lamp to be burning in the daytime, and tried to blow it out, but could not. He then tried to snuff it with his fingers, but could not, and finally he tried to extinguish it with his robe, but the lamp kept burning. The Buddha watched this and said, Modgalyayana, do you wish to put out the lamp? You cannot. You Shravakas could not even move this lamp, much less extinguish it. If you were to pour all the water from all the oceans over this lamp, it still would not go out. The water in all the lakes and rivers of the world would not put it out, because this lamp was offered with a mind of firm faith and is of great benefit. When the Buddha had said this, the beggar woman appeared before him, bowed her head at his feet, and the Buddha made the following prophecy. Woman, in future times, when 2 entire kalpas shall have passed, kalpa means eon, you will become a perfect Buddha called Light of the Lamp. The woman rejoiced and said, Deva of Devas, means God of gods, I beg you to allow me to join the order. When the Lord had given his permission, the noble Ananda and the noble Madgalyayana, his 2 chief disciples, having heard of the prophecy and watched the beggar woman join the order, knelt, pressed their palms together, and said, Lord, by reason of what former deeds was this woman born a beggar? By reason of what good deeds has she been able to meet the Buddha and attain liberation? The Buddha said, Ananda, in times long past, when the Buddha Kashyapa had come to this world, the wife of a prince invited him, and a Sangha, and at the same time a beggar woman invited him. The Buddha and the Sangha first went to the house of the beggar woman, and she became a once returner. That's a level of realization of arhats. The prince's wife, being of a high caste and wealthy, was angered at this, and she said to the Buddha, Lord, why did you not come first to my house instead of going to the beggar woman? Nevertheless, she invited the Buddha and the Sangha next day and made offerings. But because a thought of anger had arisen in her toward the Buddha and the Sangha, she was reborn in a low caste and as a poverty-stricken beggar throughout 500 lifetimes. Because she did not invite the Buddha and the Sangha and made offerings, she has now met me, joined the order, and received a prophecy. When the king, the princes, and the people heard that the beggar woman, by offering a single lamp, had attained enlightenment and received a prophecy, they honored the Buddha and made offerings of the 4 necessities, and the boys and girls of the upper and lower castes of that country prepared fragrant, sweet-smelling lamps, brought them to the Jetavana grove, and offered them to the Buddha. Filling the grove, they appeared like the night sky when it is filled with stars. Then Ananda, marveling greatly, praising and lauding the Buddha's virtues, which are beyond conception, said to the Buddha, Lord, I beg you to explain by reason of what former deeds this grove is filled with lamps. The Buddha said, Ananda, in times long past, there lived in this Jambudvipa a king by the name of Vasika, who had 84,000 minor kings subject to him. To his first wife, a son was born, whose body was the color of gold and was adorned with the 32 signs of a great man and 80 lesser monks. On the crown of his head there was a transparent jewel. He was so handsome that one never tired of looking at him. When a soothsayer was called to name the child, he was astonished and exclaimed, Excellent, excellent. This prince has no equal among the gods or humans of this universe. If he marries, he will become a universal monarch. If he becomes a monk, he will become a perfectly enlightened one. The king was delighted and asked the soothsayer to name the boy. When the soothsayer asked if there had been any unusual signs at the child's birth, and the king said that he had been born with a jewel in his forehead, the boy was named Jewel Tuft. When the boy grew up, he became a monk and through exertion became a perfect Buddha and had aided countless beings. Upon a certain occasion, the king invited the Buddha and the Sangha and honored them for 3 months. Among the assembly of monks, there was one called Arya Upashika, who had made the vow, May I become a master of gifts who offers lamps for 3 months to the Buddha and the Sangha. Each day he would go into the city and beg oil from the oil merchants and the householders. The king had a daughter named Princess Capable, who, seeing the monk going to the trouble of visiting the city each day, sent a man to ask the reason for this. The monk told him, I have made a vow to offer a lamp to the Buddha and the Sangha for 3 months. I go to the city to beg oil and the necessities. When the man reported this to the princess, she was delighted and told the monk, Do not go to the city any longer to beg for oil and the necessities. I shall give them to you. The monk replied, So be it, and departed. Thereafter, the princess sent lamp oil and the necessities to the monk each day, and the monk Arya Upashika offered his lamps. I'm not sure what Upashika is doing here. In my notes, I mentioned that Upasaka for a male and Upasika for a female means layperson. This says Upashika, which I didn't get to look up. Just maybe it's just a name. When he had brought forth a great mind of compassion, the Buddha made the prophecy. O monk, in future times, when countless kalpas, eons have passed, you will become the Buddha Dipankara, endowed with the 32 signs. When the princess heard of this prophecy, she thought, but it was I who prepared the oil and the necessities. How is it that he obtained the prophecy and I did not? Going to the Buddha, she asked him concerning this. The Buddha then gave her the following prophecy. Princess Capable, in future times when 91 kalpas have passed, you will become the Buddha Shakyamuni and be endowed with the 32 signs. The princess rejoiced, bowed her head at the Buddha's feet, and begged to join the order. The Buddha approved, ordained her, and she then refrained from taking life and exerted herself in the Dharma. The Buddha then said, Ananda, at the time the Buddha Dipankara was that monk Arya Upashika, I was the princess. Because in times past I offered a lamp, throughout countless eons I've obtained virtue in the worlds of gods and men, and was born more comely than all others, and now I have become a perfect Buddha to whom many lamps are offered. When the Buddha had thus spoken, the noble Ananda and the entire assembly rejoiced in the Lord's word and believed. So that's the first of the 4 readings for this evening. Chapter 39 is called Bhashichara. This looks to me like it means talkative conduct. Bhashi means possessing speech. Chara means conduct. Sounds like it's talking or naming someone who has very articulate, very talkative. Thus have I heard at one time. The enlightened one was residing on the Vulture's Peak in Rajagurha. At that time there was a householder in that country by the name of Sarachi, who was extremely wealthy and married to a woman of his own caste. When the wife became pregnant and the months had passed, a son was born who was handsome beyond compare. Rejoicing, the parents called a soothsayer who examined the child and said that he was endowed with the signs of virtue and would be a comfort to his people. Delighted, the parents asked for a name for the child, and when the soothsayer asked if anything unusual had occurred before the child was born, was told that the mother had formerly been unable to talk sensibly, but that when the child had entered her womb, she had become more intelligent and could speak clearly. So the soothsayer named the child Bhashichara. The child grew up to be intelligent and honest and endowed with great strength. Upon a certain occasion, when he went out with the king's son to play, he saw a beautiful girl in the house of a low caste family, fell in love with her and wished to marry her. When he returned home and asked his parents to obtain the girl for him, they told him, Our family belongs to a high caste. How is it possible for us to take a girl from one of the lower castes? The boy became miserable and said, What difference does caste make? Obtain the girl for me. If you do not, I shall die. Unhappily, the parents sent a messenger to ask for the girl. The girl's parents said, You people are of high caste, while we belong to a low caste and are not your equals. What is the reason that you ask for our daughter? The messenger told them, The boy has fallen in love with your daughter. He will not listen to his parents, and they have sent to ask for the girl. The girl's parents said, if the boy will learn to perform different kinds of acrobatics and dances and tricks, that will please the king. We will give our daughter to him. Thereupon the boy learned different kinds of acrobatics, singing, feats of strength, and so forth. Upon a certain occasion, when the king had brought together many musicians and athletes, people who could climb trees, jump, walk tight ropes, etc., the householder's son went there and performed on a tightrope, running back and forth until he was exhausted. The king had been delayed and had not seen him perform, and when he arrived, told the boy to do something. The boy climbed back up to the tightrope and began to walk across. But when he came to the middle lost his balance from exhaustion and was about to fall. He cried out for help, and immediately Modgalyayana appeared, kept him from falling, and said, "Son, would you rather fall to the ground and take a wife?" The boy said, "If you save my life, I shall not take a wife." The monk then took the boy through the sky and lightly placed him on the ground. So yeah, Modgalyayana, this monk of the Buddha, was renowned for his supernatural capabilities. So if you understand it in that respect, it doesn't seem too far-fetched. Rejoicing, the boy followed the monk to the Buddha and, bowing his head at the Lord's feet, honored him. At that moment, the Buddha was explaining that by the giving of gifts, one is born among the highest gods, that the pleasures arising from desire are. Sometimes these sentences are very long. At that moment, the Buddha was explaining that by giving of gifts, one is born amongst the highest gods, that the pleasures arising from desires are defilements, and that when one becomes a monk, one experiences great joy. That didn't quite make sense to me. Anyway, hope it did to you. When the boy heard this, his mind became freed. He believed with firm faith and became a stream winner. Pressing his palms together in reverence, he begged the Buddha to ordain him as a monk and teach him the supreme Dharma. When the Lord said welcome, the boy's hair and beard fell away, and he was a monk. Exerting himself in the Dharma, his outflows were stopped, and he became an arhat. Thereupon, Ananda said to the Buddha, "I beseech the Lord to explain by means of planting what roots of virtue this boy was attached to, that the girl was saved by Modgalyayana and has now met the Enlightened One and become an arhat." The Buddha said, "Ananda, in eons long past, there was a household in Varanasi whose wife had borne him a son who was handsome beyond compare. One day a boy found an egg along the seashore and brought it to the householder. The householder accepted it, and soon a beautiful bird came out of the egg. He gave the bird to his son, who cared for it, and as the boy and the bird both grew, they became inseparable. Whenever the boy went anywhere, he would get on the bird's back and they would fly through the air. Upon a certain occasion, hearing that there was to be a festival in another kingdom, the boy mounted his bird and went to watch it. Arriving in the other kingdom, he put the bird in a tree. Walking on to see the festival, he met the king's daughter, became inflamed with passion, and had intercourse with her. The king immediately heard of this, had the boy arrested, and gave orders for his execution. As he was about to be executed, the boy said, "Your Majesty, do not kill me with a sword. If I must die, let me commit suicide. I will climb up into a tree and throw myself down." The king agreed to this, and the boy climbed up into a tree, which was the same tree in which his bird had been placed. The boy mounted the bird, they flew away, and thus the boy's life was saved. Ananda Bashichara was that son of a householder. The girl was the king's daughter, and Modgalyayana was the bird. Because in a former lifetime the boy had cared for the bird, it saved the boy's life. Now, when passion arose, Modgalyayana again saved him. The reason why this monk's mind had been calmed and he has attained the fruit that is without the outflows is that In times long past, when a Pratyeka Buddha accepted alms from a certain householder in Varanasi, and the householder requested him to teach the Dharma, the Pratyeka Buddha said that he was unable to do this, but threw his alms ball up into the air and it flew away. Thereupon the householder thought, although this holy man has great spiritual powers, he cannot teach the Dharma. He then made a wish. In future times I meet the holy ones. It should be may I meet, I think. In future times may I meet the holy ones, and may this Pratyeka Buddha teach me the supreme Dharma. It is for this reason that his mind has been liberated and he has become an arhat. When the Buddha had thus spoken, the entire assembly rejoiced. Some became stream winners, some became once returners, some became never returners, and some became arhats. Some brought forth the roots of virtue of a Pratyeka Buddha, and some brought forth a mind of supreme enlightenment. All, when they had heard the Buddha's word, rejoiced greatly. So that's the second of this evening's 4 stories. Next is chapter 40, the householder Danda Dara. Danda means stick, Dara means to bear or to hold, so stick holder. Maybe like a staff, we'll see. Thus have I heard at one time. The enlightened one was residing in the city of Shravasti at the Jetavana monastery in Anathapindika's park. At that time there was in that country a poverty-stricken Brahmin who had an exceedingly ugly wife, no sons, and 7 daughters. Although the Brahmin had married off the daughters, they and the sons-in-law had come back to live with him. His wife was ill-natured and cursed and mistreated him, the daughters, and their husbands. One day at harvest time, the Brahmin borrowed an ox from a neighbor and went out to harvest his grain. He forgot to tie it, and it wandered away. The Brahmin then thought to himself, what former sins could I have committed, that when I go to my own house, my wife mistreats me, my daughters and sons-in-law don't even ask me to sit down, and now I've lost my neighbor's ox and won't be able to find it if I try. What should I do? As he sat thus in his misery, he saw the Buddha sitting beside a tree, all his faculties at peace. Leaning on his staff, there we go, the Brahmin thought, this monk Gautama is peaceful and happy. He has no wife to abuse him, no ill-mannered daughters or sons-in-law to mistreat him, no ox to borrow when harvest time comes, no troubles at all. The Buddha knew the Brahmin's thoughts and said to him, Elder sir, that which you have thought is true. I am without troubles. Since I have no wife, how can she mistreat me? I have no 7 daughters to come home with their husbands and make my life miserable. I have no worries about a stray ox at harvest time. Would you too not like to become a monk? The Brahmin replied, Lord, my house is the same as a tomb to me, and my wife and daughters are like enemies. Do allow me, I beg you, to become a monk. When the Buddha had said welcome, the Brahmin's hair and beard fell away, and he was a monk. When the Lord had taught him the Dharma, all his defilements were removed, and he became an arhat. Some things were more efficient in those times. Thereupon Ananda said to the Buddha, well it is, Lord, that you have created benefits for all beings without exception. But this Brahmin, what former good deeds did he do that has now been purified of all the defilements and has attained to virtue, like a piece of linen that has been bleached? The Buddha said, Ananda, this is not the only time that I have aided this Brahmin and caused him to be happy. In times long past, I delivered him from all his troubles and caused him to rejoice. When Ananda requested the Lord to explain this, the Buddha said, Ananda, listen well and remember, and I shall tell you. When Ananda said that he would listen carefully, the Buddha said, Ananda, in times long past, aeons ago, aeons past counting, past reckoning, there lived a king by the name of Beautiful, who reigned in accordance with the Dharma. At that time there was a destitute Brahmin in his kingdom by the name of Dandadhara, who, same name, who at one time borrowed an ox from a neighbor to do his work. When he returned the ox, the householder was eating, so the Brahmin put it in the shed. The ox got out and wandered away. When the householder had finished his meal, he went out to the shed to look at the ox, but it was gone. He immediately went to the Brahmin's house and asked where the ox was. The Brahmin said that he had put it in a shed. The householder said, "You have lost my ox. I want it returned." The Brahmin replied, I did bring your ox back. Where do you want me to look for it?" The Brahmin and the householder argued and disputed and finally decided to take the case to the king. They started on their way and soon came to a runaway horse. The horse's master shouted to Dandadhara to drive the horse back, and the Brahmin threw a stone at it which crippled its leg. The man said, "Why did you throw a rock and cripple my horse? You must repay me." The Brahmin said, "Why should I repay you for the horse? Let us take this to the king and let him decide." The Brahmin then became frightened, ran away from the others, and climbed up into a 3-storied shed inside of which a man was weaving. He fell down into the shed, struck the man, and killed him. The weaver's wife caught hold of the Brahmin and screamed, "You have murdered my husband. Now you must bring him back to life." The Brahmin said, "Who can bring a dead man back to life? Let us go to the king and let him decide this." As they went along, they came to a large river which crossed the road and saw a woodsman coming down it carrying an axe in his mouth. The Brahmin asked the man how deep the water was, and when the woodsman answered that it was very deep, he dropped his axe and lost it in the water. He then told the Brahmin that he must pay for the axe. Dandadhara said, You, not I, dropped the axe. Why should I repay you? Come, let us ask the king and abide by his decision." As they went on, the Brahmin became tired and thirsty and entered a wine seller's shop and asked for a drink. One of the wine seller's sons was drunk and lying on the floor. The Brahmin sat down on him by mistake. The man gasped, swallowed his robe, and choked to death. His mother seized the Brahmin and shouted, "You have murdered my son. You must restore him to life." The Brahmin replied, "I did not kill your son, and I cannot restore the dead to life. Let us go to the king and let him decide this." They went on and came to a Shakotaka tree. I found this actually in one of my dictionaries. Shakotaka tree its scientific name is Trophis aspera, and it's a type of small, crooked, ugly tree. There you go. A Shakotaka tree. They went and came to a Shakotaka tree, upon which a raven was perched. When the raven saw Dandadhara leading all the people, it asked him where he was going. The Brahmin said, "Raven, I have no choice. I have done nothing wrong, but these people are forcing me to go." The raven said, "Very well, but I asked you where you were going." When the Brahmins said that they were going to see the king, the raven said, "In that case, tell the king the following. A raven perches on a Shakotaka tree. When he perches there, his voice is exquisite, but when he goes to other trees, it becomes unpleasant. Why is this?" Going on, they came to a serpent who said, "Brahmin, find out from the king why it is that when I leave my hole, I am happy, but when I enter it again, I am unhappy." Soon they met a young woman who said, "Brahmin, find out from the king why it is that when I am at my parents' house, I want to go to the home of my in-laws, but when I am there, I want to go back to my parents' home." At last they came to the king. When they had bowed to him and sat down, he asked, "What is the reason for your coming?" All made their complaints. Then the king said to Dandadhara, "Did you return the ox to the householder's hands, or did you simply let it loose?" The Brahmin said, "When I returned the ox, the householder was eating. When I returned the ox, the householder was eating, and I didn't tell him that I'd brought it back. The king commanded, cut off Dandadara's tongue, because he didn't tell, and tear out the householder's eyes, because he saw the ox and didn't take care of it. The householder said, this Dandadara practically stole my ox, and I am to have my eyes put out. Surely this is an injustice. The next man said, Your Majesty, Dandadara crippled my mare. Mare is like a female horse, right? When the Brahmin was asked how he did this, he said, Your Majesty, as I was going along the road, this man shouted to me to drive back his horse, which was running away. I threw a stone at it and crippled it. The king said, In that case, cut out the tongue of the man who shouted to catch the horse and cut off Dandadara's hands for throwing the stone. The owner of the horse said, My horse has been crippled and now I am to have my tongue cut out. Surely this is an injustice. Then the woodsman spoke. Your Majesty, while I was hurrying through the water with my axe in my mouth, this Brahmin had asked me about the depth of the water. When I answered him, I dropped my axe and lost it. The king said, Normally people carry things in their hands. When they carry them with their teeth, this is the sort of thing that happens. The woodsman's front teeth are to be knocked out, and the Brahmin, because he asked about the depth of the water, is to have his tongue torn out. The woodsman said, This Dandadara has made me lose my axe, and now I have to lose my teeth. Surely this is an injustice. There's a certain pattern going on here. Then the woman who sold wine spoke, Your Majesty, Dandadara killed my son. The Brahmin said, I was tired and thirsty and asked for wine. When I sat down, I didn't see the boy who was lying unconscious on the floor. I sat down on him and he died. The king said, It is the fault of the woman for covering the boy's head. Dandadara is at fault for killing the boy. The two of you must marry and bring forth another son. The woman said, Dandadara killed my own son and now I am forced to marry him. Surely this is an injustice. Then the weaver's wife made a complaint. The Brahmin said, I had many enemies and was afraid and climbed up onto the roof of a shed, missed my footings, and fell down onto the weaver who died. The king said, In that case, you are to become the husband of this woman also. The woman said, How can that be called justice? First, this Brahmin kills my son, then I have to marry him. There were also two women who disputed the possession of a young boy. When they petitioned the king for a decision, he wisely said to them, Each of you take one of the boy's arms and pull. Whoever is strongest will have the boy. One woman had no thought for the child's life and pulled home. The other woman, fearing for the child, was gentle. Seeing this, the king said to the first woman, This is not your child, it belongs to the woman who was gentle with him. The mother then took the child and departed. There were also two women who had a dispute over a bolt of cloth, and the king settled that dispute in the same manner. Then Dandadara spoke to the king. Your Majesty, as these people were bringing me here, a snake requested me to ask you why it felt at ease when it left its hole, but ill at ease when it came back to it. The king said, Tell the snake that when it comes out of its hole, it is hungry and not angry, but when it has eaten and been bothered by the birds, it is ill at ease and exhausted and therefore unhappy when it returns to its hole. Tell it to avoid becoming angry when it digests its food, and its coming in and going out will be the same. Dandadara then told the king what the young woman had asked, and the king said, Tell the young woman that when she is at her in-laws, she thinks of her parents, and that is why she wants to go home. When she is at her parents, she is thinking of her husband and wants to go to him. If she will stay in one place and give up the other, she will be happy and at ease. Then Dandadara told the king about the raven. The king said, "Tell the raven that there is gold beneath the Kotaka tree, and that is why its voice is sweet. Because there is no gold under the other trees, its voice is not good when it perches there." Then the king said, "Ah, Dandadara, you have become entangled in many misfortunes, but I pardon you. You are to take the gold that is under the tree, free yourself from poverty, and live out your life doing good deeds." In accordance with the king's word, Dandadara took the gold, became wealthy, and lived in happiness throughout his lifetime. Ah, Nanda, at that time I was that king. The Brahmin about whom you have just asked was Dandadara. Just as I formerly saved him from misery and gave him wealth and caused him to rejoice, now that I have attained to perfect enlightenment, I have again made him glad by giving him the precious treasure of the Dharma. When the Buddha had thus spoken, the noble Ananda and the great assembly believed and rejoiced. So, just one more story this evening. Looks like we'll finish a bit earlier than usual. Chapter 41 is called Excellent Honey. Thus I have heard at one time. The enlightened one was residing in the city of Shravasti at the Jetavana monastery in Anathapindika's path. At that time there lived in that country a wealthy Brahmin by the name of Sinchir. That doesn't look very Sanskritic to me. Could be one of the few languages that this text has gone through that they couldn't find a translation, literal translation for. Anyway, the wealthy Brahmin by the name of Sinchir, who, being childless, went to 6 different gurus and asked whether he would have a son or not. The gurus told him, "It is not your lot in life to have a son." The Brahmin returned home, put on an old soiled robe, and sat in misery, thinking, "I am not fated to have a son. If I were to die, the king would confiscate my property." The Brahmins, confiscate, of course, means to take property with authority. Often I look up words, even if I understand a general meaning of words. Sometimes it's good to look them up just to get a precise definition in your mind. The Brahmin's wife had made the acquaintance of a Buddhist nun who one day came to the Brahmin's house to visit. Seeing the Brahmin so miserable, she asked his wife what the trouble was. The wife said, "We have no child, and 6 gurus have told my husband that this is our fate. This is the reason my husband feels so wretched." The nun said, "Those gurus know nothing at all. How could they possibly know such a thing? But the Buddha, the Tathagata, is now in the world. Since he knows the past and future perfectly, why don't you go ask him whether or not you will have a son?" I'm sure I've explained this before and you might have heard, but Tathagata is a synonym for Buddha. Tata means in such a way, Gata means gone. Gone in such a way as the past and future Buddhas. Because we know of one particular historical Buddha about 2,500 years ago in India, but there are many Buddhas, and all Buddhas, and just as this Buddha taught the way things are, loading your whiteboard. Is it going okay here? My screen's gone white and it says loading your whiteboard. Are you still with us, Daramis? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I'll keep going. Yeah, so Tathagata, Gata means go, Agata means come. So Tathagata could either mean going in such a way as the other Buddhas or coming in such a way as the Buddhas. Maybe it's deliberately ambiguous. Maybe it means coming and going in the manner of all the other Buddhas. Very difficult to translate. The only translation I've ever really seen in English of that term is "thus gone one," which has a bit of a funny sound to it. So maybe Tathagata is one of those words that'll be borrowed into English. Notice that it's not Tathagata, like some would say, but that there's a long A on the second vowel, so it's Tathagata. The second A is lengthened, Tathagata. The Buddha, the Tathagata, is now in the world. Since he knows the past and future perfectly, why don't you go ask him whether or not you'll have a son? When the nun had gone, the Brahmin's wife told him what she had said. Putting on a new robe, he went to the Buddha and asked, Lord, is it my lot in life to have a son or not? The Buddha said, Brahmin, you will indeed have a son, and that son will be endowed with virtue. When he grows up, he will wish to become a monk. Hearing this, the Brahmin rejoiced greatly and said, if I have a son, why should he not become a monk? My sorrow has now ended. He then invited the Buddha and the Sangha to his home. The Lord consented by silence. I like that saying. The Lord consented by silence. You can imagine a Buddha being dignified like that. The next day at mealtime, the Buddha and the Sangha came and sat down on the seats prepared for them, and the Brahmin and his wife honored them and served them with their various kinds of food. When they had eaten, they returned, and along the way came to a meadow with a sparkling clear spring. The Buddha and the monks sat down beside it and were dipping up water with their begging bowls, when a monkey appeared and asked Ananda for his. Here we have a talking monkey. Okay. Thinking that the monkey would break it, Ananda refused to give it to him. The Buddha said, Ananda, give your bowl to the monkey. Okay. I wouldn't disagree with the Buddha if he told me to do something like that. When Ananda gave it to him, the monkey climbed up into the tree and returned with it filled with honey, which he offered to the Buddha. When the Buddha said, take the dirt out of it, the monkey removed the dead insects that were in the honey and again gave it to the Lord. The Buddha said, mix water with the honey and I shall drink it. The monkey then mixed water with the honey and again gave it to the Buddha, who tasted it and shared it with the monks until all were satisfied. The monkey jumped up and down in delight, ran into a ravine, jumped down and died. When it had died, it entered the womb of the childless Brahmin's wife, and when the months were fulfilled, the 9 months of pregnancy, a handsome and comely boy was born. At the moment the child appeared in the world, all the vessels in the Brahmin's house were filled with honey. The Brahmin and his wife rejoiced and brought a soothsayer to examine the child. When asked what signs had appeared when the baby was born, and told that all the vessels in the house were filled with honey, the child was given the name of Excellent Honey. When the boy grew up, he requested permission to become a monk. The parents refused, and the boy told them, I cannot live in this place which has no peace. I shall surely die. The Brahmin and his wife discussed this and recalled that formerly the Buddha had prophesied that when a son was born to them, he would become a monk, agreed that if they did not give him permission, they would certainly die, and gave their permission. In faith and gladness, the boy went to the Buddha, bowed his head at his feet, and begged to become a monk. When the Buddha said, welcome, son, his hair and beard fell away, and he was a monk. When the Lord had taught him the 4 truths, his mind became perfectly liberated, his outflows were stopped, and he became pure. As the monks went hither and thither for the aid of beings, so hither and thither is an archaic literary figure of speech, meaning going in various directions here and there in a disorganized way, especially. As the monks went hither and thither for the aid of beings, they noticed that whenever the new monk became tired and thirsty, he would throw his begging bowl up into the air and it would return to him filled with honey. Thereupon Ananda said to the Buddha, Lord, because of what form of virtues has this monk, Excellent Honey, joined the Sangha and quickly become an arhat? What is the reason for this? The Buddha said, Ananda, do you remember the Brahmin named Sinchir, whom we visited long ago? Ananda said, yes, Lord, I remember him. The Buddha said, Ananda, do you recall how after we had eaten alms food and were returning, We rested beside a spring in a meadow, and a monkey took your alms bowl, filled it with honey, and offered it to me, and I ate all of the honey and shared it with the monks. Then the monkey danced with joy and departed to a ravine and died. Ananda said, yes, Lord, I remember. The Buddha said, Ananda, that monkey that offered the honey is this monk, excellent honey. Because when he met the Buddha, he rejoiced and offered honey to with a mind of joy. He was reborn as the son of a householder, handsome and comely, and has now become a monk and has stopped the outflows. Then Ananda knelt with his right knee on the ground, pressed his palms together, and said, Lord, what former evil deeds did he what former evil deeds did he, I think I should say, did he do? What former evil deeds did he do to be born as a monkey? The Buddha said, Ananda, in times long past, when the Buddha Kashyapa would come into this world, a young newly ordained monk saw another monk jump across a ditch and said to him, Monk, you jump just like a monkey. The other monk said, You do not know me. The young monk said, What do you mean? The young monk said, What do you mean, I don't know you? You are one of the Buddha Kashyapa's monks. The second monk replied, Do not ridicule me. I am not a monk in name only. I have attained to the 4 fruits of the monk. The young monk became terrified, and his hair stood on end. He knelt, pressed his palms together, and said, O monk, I confess the sin of having ridiculed you. Forgive me, I beseech you. Because he confessed this sin, he was not reborn in hell. But because he ridiculed the monk, he was reborn 500 times as a monkey. By keeping an earlier vow he had now met. By keeping an earlier vow he had now met me, become a monk, and all his sufferings had been brought to an end. Ananda, this monk, excellent honey, was that young monk who ridiculed the other. When the Buddha had thus spoken, Ananda said, By disregarding acts of body, speech, and mind, the monk failed to guard his speech and had to suffer for this reason. The Buddha said, Yes, Ananda, it is just as you say. Then, when the Lord had taught the 4 truths and explained that when the acts of body, speech, and mind are purified, the impurities of the mind are cleansed, some became stream winners, some once returners, some became never returners, some arhats, and some brought forth a mind of supreme enlightenment. All believed and rejoiced. So that ends the 4 chapters of today. I think we'll leave it there. We'll do the dedication as usual. By this merit may we overcome the defilements and gain omniscience. May I liberate all beings from the ocean of birth, old age, sickness, death. Hearing the Mahayana teachings, whatever merit I have accrued, may all beings become stainless vessels to hold the Mahayana teachings. Courageous Manjushri knew all things, and Samantabhadra did likewise, following all of their examples. I shall dedicate all these merits. May the excellent Bodhicitta take birth where it has not yet done so. Where it has been born, may it increase freely without degeneration. Thanks, Damaris. Thanks, Pirangala.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
else watching. See you next time.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks.
Remember to use the usual Zoom link, not the special. We're using a special Zoom link this week, but go back to the usual one next week. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.